August 5th, 1962. The words Cursum Perficio, Latin for "My journey ends here," hung above the Spanish-style doorway of 1235 Fifth Helena Drive in Brentwood. Marilyn Monroe had purchased this house just months earlier, finally owning a home of her own after a lifetime of borrowed spaces. She never changed that inscription. Neighbors would later tell investigators they heard sounds that night, something between a scream and a moan echoing through the Mexican-style courtyard. But what those neighbors didn't know was that this house, the only property Marilyn ever truly owned, contained secrets in every room. Secrets about the Kennedy brothers who visited in the shadows. Secrets about the pills hidden throughout the modest hacienda. Secrets about why a woman who finally had a home would write "My journey ends here" above her door. By dawn, those secrets would become the most investigated mystery in Hollywood history. And it all happened inside four walls that Marilyn chose herself, in a house she would inhabit for only 183 days before her body was found in the bedroom, the phone still in her hand. What happened in that house? Why did neighbors hear things they were later told to forget? And why did Marilyn's belongings disappear so quickly after her death that even the coroner noted the suspicious speed? Tonight, we're walking through every home Marilyn Monroe ever lived in, from the 12 foster homes of her childhood to the Waldorf Towers suite where she cried through the walls, to that final Brentwood address where everything ended. Because understanding Marilyn's homes means understanding her life, and understanding that last house means understanding her death. If you lived through 1962, you remember where you were when you heard the news. Subscribe to this channel because what we're about to reveal will change everything you thought you knew about Marilyn Monroe's final months. February 1962. Marilyn Monroe walked through the wrought iron gate at 1235 Fifth Helena Drive for the first time as owner. The real estate agent, Ruth Roberts, remembered Marilyn touching the stucco walls, running her fingers along the Mexican tile fountain in the courtyard, then looking up at the inscription. "Cursum Perficio," Marilyn read aloud. "My journey ends here." Roberts recalled feeling a chill, but Marilyn smiled and said, "It's perfect. I'll take it." The house cost $75,000, modest compared to Beverly Hills estates. It had 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a pool, and that courtyard with its trickling fountain. More importantly, it had something Marilyn had never possessed in her entire 36 years, permanence. But here's what nobody knew except Marilyn herself. This was the 24th address she would call home, and it would be her last. To understand why owning that Brentwood house mattered, you have to go back to when she was Norma Jean Mortensen, a little girl being passed from house to house across Los Angeles County. Official records show 12 different foster homes before she turned 16. 12 different families, dinner tables, bedrooms where she lay awake wondering how long this placement would last. Some families were kind. The Bolenders, who took her in as an infant, were strict but protective, but they couldn't keep her forever. Some families were dangerous. Court documents that emerged decades later referenced incidents social workers deemed inappropriate and concerning. Marilyn spoke carefully about her childhood in late 1950s interviews, never naming names, but the message was clear. Norma Jean learned early that home was temporary, that safety was an illusion. Neighbors from those early addresses remembered a quiet child who read books on the porch, who didn't play with other children. One elderly woman recalled seeing the teenage girl sitting on the front steps at dusk, staring at the street. She looked like she was memorizing something, the neighbor said, like she was studying how to leave. And that's exactly what Norma Jean did. At 16, she married James Doherty to escape the foster system. But Doherty shipped out to the Pacific, and Norma Jean found herself alone again, working at a munitions factory and dreaming of something bigger. By 1946, Norma Jean had dyed her hair platinum blonde, changed her name to Marilyn Monroe, and signed with 20th Century Fox. She was 19, living in a cramped West Hollywood apartment, splitting $30 rent with another actress. The Doheny Apartments became her first real Hollywood address, where studio executives learned her phone number, where fan mail arrived in bundles too large for her door. Neighbors remembered Marilyn differently than the world would know her. She wasn't the bombshell yet. She was a nervous young woman who practiced lines in the hallway, who borrowed coffee because she couldn't afford groceries, who read acting books until 3 a.m. One neighbor, Richard Miller, recalled seeing Marilyn crying on the back steps. He asked if she was okay. Marilyn looked up and said, "They want me to be something I'm not, but if I don't become that thing, I'll be back in the foster system." Hollywood was just another foster home, another temporary placement where she had to perform or be sent away. The Doheny apartment had thin walls. Neighbors heard Marilyn on late-night phone calls, her voice rising in frustration. They heard her playing the same Billie Holiday record about loneliness over and over. And they heard knocks at odd hours, men's voices, Marilyn's polite refusals that didn't always work. By 1950, she'd moved to Santa Monica, closer to the ocean. That apartment became infamous for one reason: the dark red lipstick stains she left in the bathroom. The next tenant discovered no amount of scrubbing could remove the lip prints on the mirror, the tile, the sink. It was as if Marilyn was trying to leave proof she had existed there, even temporarily. But Santa Monica didn't last. By 1954, Marilyn was a star, and stars didn't live in small apartments. In 1955, Marilyn fled Hollywood. She was exhausted from playing dumb blondes, tired of studio control, frustrated by being seen only as a sex object. She wanted to study at the Actors Studio with Lee Strasberg to prove Marilyn Monroe was an artist. Suite 2728 at the Waldorf Towers became her sanctuary and prison for 18 months. The Waldorf catered to the elite, presidents, foreign dignitaries, celebrities needing absolute privacy. Frank Sinatra kept a suite there. The Kennedy family maintained rooms, and now Marilyn, the most famous blonde in the world, was trying to disappear behind soundproof windows in a suite that cost more per month than most Americans earned in a year. But the Waldorf wasn't the refuge Marilyn hoped for. Receptionists remembered seeing her leave through the back entrance at 2 a.m., wearing dark sunglasses and a headscarf, trying to become invisible. Hotel staff whispered about prescription bottles accumulating in her suite, room service trays left untouched in the hallway, crying that echoed through supposedly soundproof walls. One housekeeper described finding Marilyn asleep on the bathroom floor, an empty pill bottle inches from her hand. The manager called Marilyn's publicist, who made the incident disappear from official records. This was the pattern: Marilyn struggling, someone intervening, evidence erased. Neighbors noticed the parade of visitors to Suite 2728, Lee Strasberg and his wife Paula, who became cult-like figures in Marilyn's life. Arthur Miller, the playwright she would marry, sneaking in because he was still married. And men in suits who looked like government officials, whose names were never entered in visitor logs. The Waldorf revealed something crucial. Marilyn was paying thousands per month to live in someone else's building, sleeping in someone else's furniture. The Waldorf was luxury, but it wasn't home. By 1961, after the misfits in the Nevada desert, Marilyn's marriage to Arthur Miller was over, her contract with Fox was in dispute, and she was living in yet another temporary West Los Angeles apartment. She was 35 years old, had earned millions over 15 years, and owned nothing, not a house, not even a fully paid-off car. Everything was leased, rented, borrowed, temporary. That's when Marilyn made a decision that would change her final chapter. She was going to buy a house, not a mansion, not a Beverly Hills estate. She wanted something modest, private, hers. She wanted a home. Ruth Roberts showed Marilyn 7 properties in early 1962. Each had something wrong: too big, too exposed, too expensive. Then they arrived at 1235 Fifth Helena Drive. The house was perfect in its imperfection. Small by Hollywood standards, just over 2,500 square feet, tucked on a quiet cul-de-sac where lawyers lived, not movie stars. It had a Mexican courtyard with a trickling fountain, terracotta tiles, lemon trees, roses needing pruning, and above the door, those words, "Cursum Perficio, my journey ends here." When Ruth Roberts saw Marilyn staring at those words, she offered, "We can have that removed. It's a bit morbid." Marilyn touched the letters, traced them with her finger, and smiled. "No, I like it. It feels honest." On February 7, 1962, Marilyn Monroe became a homeowner. $75,000 paid in cash. For the first time in her life, she had an address that couldn't be taken away. What happened inside 1235 Fifth Helena Drive between February and August 1962 would become decades of investigation and controversy. Neighbors weren't prepared for the activity that began immediately. Black sedans arriving late at night, men in dark suits entering through the back gate, voices echoing through the courtyard. Screams some neighbors reported, though others heard nothing unusual. One neighbor told investigators she saw Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General, entering through the side gate on at least 3 occasions. Another recognized Peter Lawford's car parked down the street multiple times per week. But neighbors also saw Marilyn during the day, gardening in old jeans and no makeup, her blonde hair in a simple ponytail, walking her dog Muff, a white terrier from Frank Sinatra, reading by the fountain with books and scripts, staying until sunset wrapped in a blanket. Marilyn hired housekeeper Eunice Murray, who would later give conflicting statements about those 6 months. Initial accounts mentioned Marilyn's excitement about the house, plans to renovate the kitchen, desire to adopt a child now that she had a stable home. Marilyn bought Mexican furniture, hung meaningful artwork, arranged books on custom shelves. She was building something. But prescription bottles were there too. In the bathroom, kitchen, bedroom, nightstand, Nembutal for sleep, phenobarbital for anxiety, chloral hydrate when nothing else worked. Dr. Ralph Greenson visited regularly, conducting intensive psychoanalysis, his notes sealed for decades and only partially released in the 1990s, painted a woman fighting desperately to survive. Marilyn talked about foster home abuse, studio executives treating her like property, husbands who loved her image but not her reality, miscarried babies, fear of dying alone. But Greenson's notes revealed something few knew. Marilyn was planning to buy another house in Mexico to escape Hollywood entirely. She talked about retiring, teaching, writing her autobiography, and telling her truth. She was talking about freedom. And that's when the visits to Fifth Helena Drive became more frequent, more intense, more dangerous. August 4, 1962, Saturday, Marilyn Monroe's last full day. What happened during those 24 hours has been investigated for over 60 years. The official story: Marilyn died of barbiturate overdose, probably accidental, possibly intentional, case closed. But neighbors on Fifth Helena Drive tell a different story. Cars arriving after 10 p.m., men's voices arguing in the courtyard, a scream around midnight, a helicopter flying low around 1 a.m., unusual for residential Brentwood. An ambulance, some swear, arrived, then left without taking anyone. Police who showed up around 4 a.m. but didn't seem surprised. And Marilyn's belongings, diary, photographs, letters, removed so quickly that investigating officers noted the suspicious speed. Eunice Murray claimed she woke around 3 a.m., noticed a light under Marilyn's bedroom door, knocked, got no answer, called Dr. Greenson. He arrived and broke the window to get inside. They found Marilyn on her bed, naked, face down, phone in her hand, dead. But Murray's story changed over the years. In later interviews, she admitted the timeline didn't make sense, that there were people at the house earlier she didn't mention, that she'd been told what to say by powerful people. The autopsy revealed lethal levels of Nembutal and chloral hydrate, but no pills in her stomach, meaning the drugs were administered another way. Needle marks suggested injections, but the official report barely mentioned them. The locked filing cabinet where Marilyn kept her diary was found open and empty. The red diary where she supposedly wrote about the Kennedy brothers was never found. FBI files declassified in the 1990s revealed the government had monitored her communications for years. They knew about her relationships, her political sympathies. They knew she was dangerous because she knew too much and was unstable enough to talk. 1235 Fifth Helena Drive went on the market in 1963, sold to a family who had no connection to Hollywood, no interest in Marilyn's legend. They removed the inscription above the door. Cursum Perficio was taken down, the iron letters packed away, the doorway painted over as if those words had never existed. The house changed hands multiple times over the decades. Each owner dealt with the curiosity seekers, the fans who drove by slowly taking photographs, the occasional trespasser who tried to climb the fence to see where Marilyn died. In the 1990s, the property was purchased by someone who intended to demolish the house and build something modern, but public outcry saved it. The Los Angeles Conservancy fought to have the house designated as a historical landmark, arguing that 123005 Fifth Helena Drive was the last tangible connection to Marilyn Monroe, the only home she ever owned, and therefore deserved protection. Today, the house still stands. The Mexican courtyard still has its fountain. The roses that Marilyn planted are long gone, replaced by whatever the current owners prefer. But the address remains, and every August, on the anniversary of her death, fans gather on Fifth Helena Drive, leaving flowers and letters and photographs at the gate. Looking back at all 24 addresses where Marilyn lived, a pattern emerges that explains everything about her death. She was a woman who never had permanence, never had security, never had a place she could truly call her own until those final 6 months. The 12 foster homes taught her that love was conditional, that safety was temporary, that she was always one mistake away from being sent somewhere else. The Hollywood apartments taught her that fame didn't mean freedom, that being the most desired woman in America didn't mean she had control over her own life. The Waldorf Towers taught her that luxury was just another form of imprisonment, that you could spend thousands on a hotel suite and still wake up feeling homeless. And the Brentwood house, that small Spanish-style hacienda with the fountain and the roses and the inscription above the door, taught her something devastating, that even when you finally have a home, even when you finally own something that can't be taken away, you might still not be safe. Because the real danger wasn't about addresses or property ownership. The real danger was about knowing too much, about threatening powerful men, about being famous enough to be heard and unstable enough to actually speak. Marilyn Monroe spent her entire life looking for a home, and when she finally found one, when she finally had those 4 walls and that courtyard and that door with the words, "My journey ends here," it became the place where all her journeys ended. If you drive through Los Angeles today, you can visit most of the addresses where Marilyn lived. The foster homes in Van Nuys and Hawthorne, where a little girl learned that love was conditional. The apartment buildings in West Hollywood and Santa Monica, where a young starlet practiced being Marilyn Monroe in front of cheap mirrors, and of course, 12305 Fifth Helena Drive in Brentwood, which still draws visitors from around the world who want to stand where Marilyn stood, touch the walls she touched. Imagine what those final 6 months felt like. But what you're really seeing when you visit these addresses is the geography of a life spent searching for love, for safety, for recognition, for respect, for peace, for belonging. Marilyn found some of those things at some of those addresses. She found brief moments of happiness at the Doheny apartments when her first big movie premiered. She found flashes of intellectual joy at the Waldorf Towers when Lee Strasberg told her she had real talent. She found periods of hope at Fifth Helena Drive when she planted those roses and imagined a future where she could finally rest. But she never found what she needed most, the absolute certainty that she was wanted, not for what she could give or how she looked or what she represented, but for who she actually was beneath all the performance. Norma Jean Mortensen, the girl from the foster homes who read books on porches and memorized escape routes, the one who became Marilyn Monroe because Marilyn was who they wanted, even though Norma Jean was who she was, the one who bought a house with "My journey ends here" above the door and didn't change it because maybe, somewhere deep down, she knew. The inscription above her door said, "My journey ends here." But Marilyn's journey didn't end on August 5th, 1962. It continues every time someone tells her story, every time someone visits one of her addresses, every time someone looks at her photographs and sees beyond the sex symbol to the human being who spent 36 years looking for a place to belong. Her homes tell that story better than any biography ever could, because homes are supposed to be where we feel safe, where we can be ourselves, where we don't have to perform or pretend or worry about being sent away. Marilyn Monroe lived in 24 different addresses and died in the only one she ever owned. That single fact explains more about her life and death than all the conspiracy theories, all the investigations, all the books and documentaries and speculations combined. She was still looking for home when she died, still searching for that place where Norma Jean could exist without becoming Marilyn, still hoping that somewhere, somehow, she would find 4 walls that felt like safety instead of another temporary placement. And maybe, in the end, that's the real tragedy of Marilyn Monroe. Not the conspiracy, not the Kennedy affair, not even the suspicious circumstances of her death. The tragedy is simpler and more devastating. She finally bought a home, and it became the place where her searching ended forever.